The webinar will be close to 2 hours with a break in the middle. Questions should be placed in questions and answers. And every time Cristiana finishes a group of species, the presentation will be divided in 4 groups. Every time she finishes, we will place the questions there. Okay. All right. So I think it's time to officially start. Today we have a very important, very useful presentation about one of the most demanding groups of species in Europe to identify. Actually, is probably or for sure the group with more species in Europe. We have today Cristiana Cerrato, that is a very experienced biologist working with these species, and is going to give us this amazing talk, and probably it will help a lot many of us studying these species. Cristiana is a freelance biology. It's a member of the Italian Lepidopterological Society Association. And he has a long experience working in monitoring and conservation projects, mainly in mountain ecosystems. Is now currently cooperating with Gran Paradiso National Park and Turin University. And when we thought about giving a presentation about Erebia genus, we have several candidates, but then we met Cristiana and we thought it was the perfect person to give this talk. So Cristiana, the floor is yours. You have a lot of time, but at the same time, let's try to stick to the 2 hours or a bit less for people to not to die during this knowledgeable presentation. The floor is yours, Cristiana. Thank you for being here.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Good afternoon and welcome to this presentation about the Erebia species of the European Alps. And before starting, I would like to briefly introduce and thanks the other 2 authors of this presentation. So Simona Bonelli, that is from Turin University. She is part of the board committee of Butterfly Conservation Europe. She is the national coordinator of the Italian Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, and she's also a co-founder of the Italian Lepidopterological Association. And especially Paolo Palmi, an active member of the Italian Lepidopterological Association, and he's a profound expert on alpine butterflies. And he has held several courses on the recognition of alpine species in Italy and Switzerland, and almost all the photographs in this presentation were taken personally by him during years of sampling in the Alps, in the Italian Alps, following our beloved and wonderful Erebia species. So we can start. The genus Erebia contains in the European Alps 36 species, following the checklist of the European butterflies from Wiemers. And several of these species are endemic of the Alps, and they also are altitudinal specialists. And this make less common to observe these species outside the mountain range, obviously. The general appearance of the genus is characteristic, with a brown-gray background and usually with orange bands or spot, and also with ocelli. This term ocelli is important, and we will use a lot it during this presentation. So with this term, we mean black rounded spots that may have a white center inside, and in this case they are called pupilled ocelli, or they may not have this white inside. And in this second case, they are called blind ocelli. So the Erebia species are usually, in many cases, quite similar among them. And small details, for example, the extent of the orange bands and points, or also the number and position of ocelli, are diagnostic. And some species are very similar to each other, and some are also education requires attention, and sometimes also the geographic location, the habitat, and the altitude may be helpful. To navigate through these 36 species, as already told by Juan, we grouped them into 4 broad morphological groups, which have no taxonomic significance, but are an attempt that we made to facilitate identification in the field, highlighting common characteristics, and then, in a case-by-case situation, observing the differences between pairs of similar species. And for each species, we also gave information on the dimension, especially the wingspan, that is summarized with minimum and maximum values taken from the trait database of the European butterflies. And we also gave distribution maps, altitudinal range, and habitat association that have been taken from the last IUCN Red List species accounts. However, we always must keep in mind that this ecological information, especially altitudinal distribution and habitat, microhabitat association, results from current knowledge, and they also may vary slightly at a local level, and also in some cases they can change through time, as for example it has been happening in the last year, also as a result of the rapid climate change we are currently experiencing. So the ecological information are important, but we have to consider them with flexibility. So we can start now with the first morphological group, which includes species that have an almost similar upper side and an almost similar pattern on the upper side and the underside of the wings. Inside this group, we identified 2 subgroups. The first one is a group of 6 species that are quite small, in which both sides of the wing are almost similar, except for the ground color, that is usually slightly darker on the upper side in all of these species. Upper side and underside have the typical orange, reddish, post-discal bands or spot that we have told are typical of this genus. And they have usually ocellin sides that are blind, so practically reduced to black spots. The first species of this group is Erebia melampus. Erebia melampus is endemic to the Alps, but it is widely distributed inside it. It is common in different biotopes along a quite wide altitudinal range, and it is common especially in subalpine and alpine grasslands. Looking at the photographs, we can see that the characteristics ocelli are reduced to black dots in the orange post-discal bands on both sides of the wings. They are really variable in dimensions, and sometimes they can be really small, especially on forewings. An important point we have to look in Erebia melampus is on the hindwings. The first 2 orange spots that we can see here are slightly displaced toward the base of the wings. And moreover, the second one is slightly larger than the others. this helps us to distinguishing Erebia melampus from another really similar species, in particular from its closest looking species, that is Erebia sudetica. Erebia sudetica has, again, as Erebia melampus, blind black ocelli in the reddish postdiscal spots, but on hindwing, both upper side and underside, these reddish spots are of equal size and they are located in a regular row. Unlike Erebia melampus, Erebia sudetica is a highly localized species that in the Alps is present only in part of the French Alps and in central Switzerland. It is also listed in the Annex 4 of the Habitats Directive, and it has been assessed as endangered following the last European Red List of butterflies, because it has declined also in the Alps, especially at low altitudes. So the opportunity to find both species in the same place is quite limited. But there are other three other more common species that are quite similar to Erebia melampus and that can be found in the same places, in the same habitats and biotopes, and they are Erebia epiphron, Erebia pharte, and Erebia eriphyle. And this slide provides an overview to highlight the differences within these four species. So at first, we can look at Erebia epiphron. In Erebia epiphron, to discriminate it from Erebia melampus and from the other in the slide, we have to look in particular on the hindwing underside. We can see here in the slide with the red arrow. Here, Erebia epiphron, we can see that it has almost no red spots, or red spots highly reduced, just surrounding the black dots on hindwing underside. And this is the main characteristics that can help us in identifying Erebia epiphron. Erebia pharte, this here, the one located in this part of the slide, has a particular characteristics. So it has no black ocelli, neither dots in the orange postdiscal spot, both on the upper side and the underside of fore and hindwing. So this is the main characteristic of Erebia pharte, the absence of black ocelli and dots in the orange postdiscal spots. And finally, Erebia eriphyle, that probably is the most difficult in the discrimination between with Erebia melampus. So Erebia eriphyle on hindwing underside has the two reddish spot, the first spots here identified and pointed with the red arrow, that are almost in contact, just separated only by the radial vein. Moreover, we can look in Erebia eriphyle also on forewing underside, where we can see that the reddish postdiscal bands fades towards wing. In contrast, in melampus, the discal bands is quite sharply defined, and the rest of the wing, especially towards the basal area, is brown. There is no fading of the orange. These are the main characters that can help us in the field in the identification and discrimination of this group of species. But now we can have a short look at each of these species. Again, looking also at the habitat and their distribution. So the first one is the last one that we just saw, the most difficult one, that is Erebia eriphyle, but its distribution and its habitat association can help us a little bit because it is less widespread than Erebia melampus. It is distributed in many countries of the European Alps, but it is always very localized, very locally distributed, and it is, for example, absent from the French Alps, and it interests only partially the Italian Alps. Its main habitats also is a quite particular one because it lives in humid forbs communities or in grasses places spread between loose alder belts, so particular habitats, especially for an Arabia species. As a general remark, in Erebia eriphyle, we can also see that on the wing upper side, the orange spot can be also reduced, so less marked than either in the other species of this morphogroup. And on the forewing upper side, the black ocelli inside the orange spots can also be absent. The second species that we look closer among this group is Erebia epiphron. Erebia epiphron, like Erebia melampus, is again widespread in the Alps, and it is a common inhabitant of subalpine and alpine grasslands. So there is a high possibility, a frequent possibility of meeting Erebia epiphron and Erebia melampus in the same biotope and along the same altitudinal range. Erebia epiphron, moreover, it is a highly variable species, both considering the dimension of the orange spots and also the number of the black dots, which in rare cases can also be completely missing. But always, as we have said before, diagnostic character is are the orange spots on hindwing underside that can be missing or, in case presence, are highly reduced, just rounding the black dots. But to complicate a little bit the situation, Erebia epiphron has a really similar species that is called Erebia christi. These two species are really similar, and characteristics that I told about the orange absent or really reduced on hindwing underside is useless because both have this feature, but there are two other characteristics that can really help in the recognition of Erebia christi from Erebia epiphron. The first one is related to the black dots on forewing, as you can see here, indicated from the red arrows. So in particular, in Erebia christi, the first black dot is located here just after the last radial vein, so one space higher, considering the spaces between the veins in the wing of the butterfly, if compared to Erebia epiphron. This is really an important characteristics. And the second one is on hindwing underside. In Erebia christi, the hindwing underside is not uniform, but the basal part is darker. Instead, in Erebia epiphron, the hindwing underside is uniform. So we can't see this difference between the basal part and the outer part as it is present in Erebia christi. Fortunately for the operators in the field, not sure for the butterfly, but Erebia christi is a highly localized species. It occurs very between Italy and Switzerland, and it also lives in extremely peculiar habitat. So it frequents rock cliffs near the tree line. So the possibility of confusing Erebia epiphron and Erebia christi is really limited by the range and the habitat used by Erebia christi. The Erebia christi is a really interesting species. It is present, it is listed in the annexes 2 and 4 of the Habitats Directive, one of the few Erebia listed in the Habitat Directive, and it has been assessed as near threatened following the last European Red List of butterflies, because its population is really limited, localized, and also because it is highly fragmented. But currently, fortunately, there are no clear sign of decline. So finally, the last one among the small Erebia with this almost similar upper side and underside is Erebia pharte. As already told before, it has no black ocelli nor dots in the orange postdiscal spots, neither in the upper side, neither in the underside, both forewing and hindwing, and so it is usually quite easy to be recognized. But unfortunately, really rarely, but some specimens have small black dots in the orange spots on forewing. And also, unfortunately, sometimes some Erebia melampus may not have the black dots inside the orange spots. In this situation, the two species are more difficult to be recognized in the field, but one feature that usually is really, really important is always located on hindwing underside. If we look at the orange spots on hindwing underside, we can see that in Erebia pharte they are nearer to the margin of the wing if compared to Erebia melampus, where they are located more toward the basal area. But this is a particular situation in which we have in the field both rare cases of rare specimen of these two species. And obviously, in this case, and in case of doubt, the analysis of the genitalia of the males can be helpful in distinguishing Erebia pharte or Erebia melampus, anomalous or local variation specimens or population. Now we can look at the second subgroup inside this first one, that is that comprises four a little bit bigger and also a little bit easier species. The first one is Erebia medusa, a really nice species that fly usually quite at the beginning of the flight season in the mountain. It is a quite widespread species in many parts of Europe and also in the Alps. But unfortunately, in the last decades, in several countries, it has undergone a decline in abundance, and also decline in distribution has been recorded. So it is an important species we have to look at. Its main habitat is represented by grasslands near wooded areas, and Erebia medusa is quite easily recognized in the field because, as already told, it has an almost similar upper side and underside. And it is characterized by the presence of white pupilled black ocelli inside the orange postdiscal spots, both on underside and upper side of both wings. And really importantly, these orange postdiscal spots are rounded. They have this particular rounded form. Erebia medusa has a really close looking species. They are really similar, and it is Erebia eme. If we look at the pattern of the wings, they are almost identical. So Erebia eme has white pupilla black ocelli in the reddish orange spots that are rounded. But there is an important and clear feature that can help us in distinguishing them. We have to look at the tip of the antennal club in a similar way of what can be done in distinguishing Timericus sylvestris and Timericus lineola. We have to look in the eyes, our Erebia species, and we have to look at the tip of the antennal club from below. In Erebia eme, these tips are black, while in Erebia medusa, these tips are pale brown. And these characteristics helps and is a fundamental feature in distinguishing these two species. Erebia eme is less widespread than Erebia medusa. And for example, in the Italian Alps, it is restricted to the east. But its range in many cases overlap with the one of Erebia medusa, and they have also an overlapping biotope use and altitudinal range. So it is important where in the range where both species are present to pay attention to these characteristics. Usually, Erebia eme starts to fly later in the season than Erebia medusa, but also considering the flight period, there is a temporal overlap between these two species. So Erebia eme and Erebia medusa are superficially similar, only superficially in this case, to another Erebia species, that is Erebia albergana. In Erebia albergana, as opposite to Erebia eme and medusa, the reddish orange postdiscal spots have a different shape. They are indeed lanceolate, so they are oval and pointed, and then they resemble to me a fried egg, and this can help in its recognition in the field because they are really elongated and they are never rounded as in the case of Erebia eme and Erebia medusa. So if we look at this feature, these three species can be really easily recognized. Erebia albergana, concerning its distribution and its ecology, is again, as Erebia medusa, quite widespread in the mountains of Europe, but in Switzerland and in Austria, it is only found in the southern part of the Alps. And it has a slightly higher altitudinal range than Erebia medusa because it is mainly an inhabitant of subalpine grasslands. But again, Erebia medusa and albergana can overlap along the altitudinal range. But as you can see here again in these photographs, the orange spots are completely different because they are not rounded but lanceolated but oval. The last species in this first group is Erebia manto. Erebia manto is locally distributed in several mountain ranges in the European Alps, and in the Alps it is present in the Maritime Alps, in French and in Italy, and then it is also present from the Central to the Julian Alps. And it is present in meadows and also in many different kind of grassy woodland margins. Erebia manto is a particular species, can be quite easily recognized from Erebia oeme, Erebia medusa, and Erebia albergana because it doesn't have pupille docelli. If you look at this photograph, and also here, you can see that the ocelli in Erebia manto are blind and are black dots. But it can be, in some cases, more similar to the smaller Erebia that we presented above. So the smaller Erebia with an almost identical upper side and underside. It can be recognized from the size because it slightly bigger, but especially at the beginning of the monitoring, the sites, it's not always so easy to be used as a feature in the field. So we can have also to rely on other features, other characteristics. And if we have to look in particular again on the hindwing underside, because we can observe that usually these are particular local variation present in Switzerland and in Italy, and in which the red orange spot, the reddish orange spots are wider than in other population of Erebia manto. But in any case, in Erebia manto, these spots are usually bigger if compared to the other Erebia species in this group. And moreover, if we look at the series of spots on the hindwing underside, we can see that the orange spots are present also in the first two intravein spaces starting from the costa. Well, usually we don't have orange spots in Erebia melampus, Erebia epiphron, Erebia eriphyle. So in the small Erebia with an almost similar upper side and underside that we saw before. This is one of the few Erebia species in which also we have a quite visible sexual dimorphism. So in particular in Erebia manto, the females are easier to recognize than the males because they have lighter and bigger spots. In some population and some local variation of Erebia manto, in particular, these spots can also be yellowish or in some cases also even paler. So, for example, they can be whitish silvery. And that's all concerning the first morphological group of Erebia. And I do not know if there are questions.
No, so far there are not questions, Cristiana. It was really well explained. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I can go through the second group. Is it okay?
I think so. Yeah. I
Okay.
mentioned it on the chat. If someone has a specific question of a specific species or something, they can ask on the question and answer section. So yeah, you can continue. Cristiana, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So we can start with the second group. This second morphological group include species with almost no orange spots or spots that are not really evident on hindwing underside, and in which the hindwing underside has a maline brown ground color. we have three subgroups. We identify three subgroups. The first one is the easiest among the Erebia because it is composed by the species that we called unmistakable, because they are really characteristics and particular, and they are also usually highly localized inside the European Alps. The first species is Erebia claudina. Erebia claudina is endemic to the European Alps. It is highly localized in the central Austrian Alps. Relatively recently, one isolated colony has also been discovered in Italy, in South Tyrol. And this species inhabits subalpine and alpine grasslands, mainly near the tree line. And its diagnostic features is the presence of white postdiscal dots on hindwing underside. And as you can see, the background color of this hindwing underside is uniform brown. So this is really characteristics. Moreover, in the females, there is another feature that make them even easier to be recognized in the field, that is the presence of these same white postdiscal dots also on hindwing upper side. And this can make this species unmistakable. The second one is Erebia flavofasciata, again endemic to Europe and with a really restricted range, encompassing southeastern Switzerland and the neighboring region in Italy and Austria. It frequents sunny grass slopes around and above the tree line, and unfortunately it has been assessed as endangered in the last European Red List, in particular due to its restricted range and the fragmentation of many subpopulations and the declines of habitat, especially in the lower part of its altitudinal range and distribution. So this species also should be carefully monitored where it is present. It's a really nice species in my opinion, and it is unmistakable because on hindwing underside it has a completely yellow postdiscal band, yellowish, but lighter than the orange reddish spot of the other Arabias. And this yellow postdiscal band has inside a series of blind ocelli. The last of this group is Erebia epystigne. Erebia epystigne is a species that only marginally interests the European Alps, and in the Alps has been recorded only in a small part of the French Alps, where it is distributed to, it is present only in grassy rocky clearings in open woodland. So it has a restricted range and a particular habitat for the Alps, so it is really highly localized. It is unmistakable because on forewing upper side it has a quite broad postdiscal yellowish band with big and evident pupilled ocelli, and moreover, again in forewing upper side, it has a reddish patch inside the cell. Also the underside, the hindwing underside, are diagnostic because it has quite evident pale veins on hindwing underside, and it is also quite a big species. So always remaining in the second group, we have two species quite similar, really similar between them, and they are relatively small in size, and they have no orange spots on hindwing underside. So the first one is Erebia mnestra. It is widely distributed in the Alps, except for the easternmost part of the Alps. And it lives in subalpine and alpine grassland. Sometimes it is linked to dry grasslands, but not exclusively. It can be found also in other type of grassland. And it is quite widespread in many places. Its main feature is the brown ground color on hindwing underside, that is darker in males than in females. And another important feature of this species is the paler postdiscal band that it has on hindwing underside, that is here pointed by the red arrow. This paler postdiscal band is more visible in females than in males. On forewing upper side, this species has a wide orange postdiscal band, and the subapical ocelli can be both present or absent. They are usually missing in males and present in number of two, but small in females. In any case, local exceptions are possible, so they can be also males with ocelli and females without. So this is not a univocal diagnostic feature. This species on hindwing upper side has also a reddish band short and without, in this case, black ocelli. So these feature together, the hindwing underside, brown with the paler postdiscal band, the forewing upper side with this broad orange band, and the short reddish band on hindwing upper side are important diagnostic feature in Erebia mnestra. Its closest looking species, the second one in these subgroups, is Erebia aethiopellus. These species are quite similar, and they can be mainly recognized looking at the hindwing underside, where the paler postdiscal bands, both in males and females, that we mentioned above, is much more evident. And the hindwing underside, and also this paler discal band in particular, is irrorated with white small scales. Moreover, also on forewing underside, these small white scale are present also on the apex of the wing. So the presence of this small white scale on the ground color of the underside, in particular on the hindwing, but also on the apex of forewing, are an important diagnostic character, the most important diagnostic character in recognizing Erebia mnestra from Erebia aethiopellus. Erebia aethiopellus is an opposite to Erebia mnestra, really localized species with a restricting range, and it is possible to find both species only in a small part of the European Alps, because Erebia aethiopellus is present roughly from the Maritime to the Caucasian Alps, and in a small range between Italy and France. So the possibility to have both species together are not so high. But during the last year, new population of Erebia aethiopellus have been observed also a little bit outside of this range. So we have to pay attention and to look at this characteristic in when we found small Erebia species similar to the mnestra also outside of the known range of Erebia aethiopellus. Another important characteristic in Erebia aethiopellus can be found in the males. If we look at the forewing upper side, we can see that in Erebia aethiopellus the male have a quite marked endocorneal black endocorneal patch that is interrupted only by some reddish lines in correspondence of the veins, and this is not present in Erebia mnestra. Again, in the second group, we have 5 a little bit bigger species, again with no orange spots on in-wing underside and a mainly brown ground color. The first one is Erebia aethiops. It is a really widespread species that inhabits a wide variety of habitats, from woodland clearings to subalpine grasslands. Indeed, in the Alps, it is present from the mountain to the subalpine belt up to the tree-line ecotone. So usually it is not present in the alpine grasslands at a very high altitude. Erebia aethiops is a highly variable species, especially concerning the dimension and the amount of orange on the forewing upper side. An important feature of the species in its recognition is the pale brown or pale gray postdiscal band that the specimen have on hindwing underside. That is also characterized by the presence of a series of minute white dots. Moreover, an important characteristic that it's not present in the totality of the specimen, but that is quite common, is the shape of the red patch on the forewing upper side, that usually has a narrowing around the ocelli, having a shape that is called 8 shape. So if we look at the forewing upper side and we see a red patch with an 8-shaped, with the shape of can be front of an Erebia aethiops. And if we look on hindwing underside and we see this paler postdiscal band with these minute white dots, we can be quite sure about the identification of Erebia aethiops. So Erebia aethiops has 2 quite similar species that are Erebia euryale and Erebia ligea, that can be separated in particular by specific. This feature is the appearance, the form of the fringe, because the fringe in Erebia aethiops have a uniform gray-brown color, while in Erebia euryale and Erebia ligea, these fringes are checkered, so are white and dark brown. This is the color of the fringes in these two species. So if we see two quite big species that apparently can remember as Erebia aethiops, but if they have these checkered fringes, we are sure that cannot be Erebia aethiops, but we are inside this group of Erebia euryale or Erebia ligea. And now we can try to see how to recognize this this pair of species that are a little bit more difficult. So before a short presentation of Erebia euryale, that Erebia euryale is locally distributed in the mountains of Europe and in the Alps. It inhabits subalpine and alpine grasslands, both near woodland but also above the tree line. And it can be found also in damp places. It is again a highly variable species. For example, the ocelli on the forewing are usually pupilled, as we can see here, but in some cases they can be also really small or blind. On the hind wing, it usually has from 3 to 4 ocelli, but they can also be absent. Moreover, other local variations are also quite common. For example, in the eastern Italian Alps, there are populations with almost no orange on both sides of the wing. And in these cases, always the checkered fringes are diagnostic, telling us that we are inside the group of Erebia euryale versus Erebia ligea. Now we look at Erebia euryale and Erebia ligea in detail and try to see which are the main characteristics essential to differentiate the species. So the first one we have looking at the forewing underside. In Erebia ligea, the broad orange band in this postdiscal area is sharply defined, and the rest of the wing is brown, plain brown. As a comparison, in Erebia euryale, this broad orange band fades towards the basal area, so we have no this sharp definition of the two-color pattern on forewing underside. Okay. A second important characteristic is on hindwing underside. In Erebia ligea, on hindwing underside, there is always a pure white postdiscal strip near the costa that has a shape similar to a triangle. And this short postdiscal triangle is always pure white, completely white. In opposite, in Erebia euryale, we can have or not this white patch starting from the costa. When it is present, it has never the shape of a triangle. And moreover, it is usually not pure white, but irrogated with gray or yellow scales. So it's not a pure white. This is, again, a really important feature in differentiating these two species. A third feature can be observed in males, only in males, while in Erebia ligea, it is useful to observe the forewing upper side in transparency, because There, Erebia ligea has a dark undercorneal patch that prevents the wing veins from being seen. So if we look at the forewing upper side of Erebia ligea in transparency, we cannot see the veins, and we see a clear darker patch that is absent in Erebia euryale, but obviously this is present only in males. Erebia ligea, in comparison to, as different to Erebia euryale, frequent slightly lower altitudes than Erebia euryale, and it is more strictly associated to woodland. So it has a lower altitude distribution, but these two species overlap along the altitudinal gradient, so there are many places in which they both can be found, and also Erebia ligea could potentially expand its altitude toward its altitudinal range toward higher altitudes, so it should be a careful check. We don't have rely only on altitude to differentiate these two species. Now we have Erebia neoridas. This is a species that can be recognized quite easily in the field. Firstly, looking at the forewing upper side. On forewing upper side, Erebia neoridas has the orange postdiscal band with a particular shape because it starts larger near the costa and then it becomes increasingly narrow, thus resembling a sickle. Indeed, it can be called a sickle-shaped band, a sickle or a triangle. And this characteristic is really important in its identification. Then, on hindwing underside, there are two characteristic features. At first, there are no ocelli, and secondly, there is a postdiscal band paler than the brown background. So the combination of these three features make Erebia neoridas quite easy to be recognized in the field. Moreover, Erebia neoridas has a limited distribution, being present in the Alps only in the southwestern French and Italian Alps, and it occurs in woodland clearings from the mountain to the subalpine belt up to the tree-line ecotone. And moreover, it is also called the autumn ringlets because it is a species that usually fly at the end of the flight period, of the flight season. So the last species in this group is Erebia meolans. It has a wide range in the Alps, but it is always localized. It frequents subalpine and alpine grasslands, also and often near woods, and usually with the presence of rocks. It is a relatively big species, and it is characterized by the presence of pupilled ocelli on both sides of the wing, but in a variable number. On forewing underside, we can have an important feature, that is the orange postdiscal band that is sharply defined, contrasting with the brown ground color of the rest of the wing. On hindwing underside, males are plain dark brown. The color is plain dark brown, while females are different because they are paler. The ground color is light brown, and it is also irrorated by a white scale. Erebia meolans is in some way similar to three species belonging to the next morphological group, but it can be separated from them mainly thanks to this broad orange band sharply defined on hindwing forewing underside. But we will see this a little better now, because we can compare Erebia meolans with these three species that are Erebia styx, Erebia styria, and Erebia montana. As can be seen hopefully clearly in the images, in Erebia styx, styria, and montana, on forewing underside, the orange band fades towards the basal area of the wings, while in Erebia meolans the broad orange band is sharply defined and the basal part of the forewing underside is plain dark brown. This is the most important feature in recognizing Erebia meolans from these three species that, following our division, belong to the third morphological groups, but as I have told you now, can be considered quite similar to Erebia meolans. But we will see these three species more in detail soon, and maybe now, as previously told by Joan, we can have a short break. If
Yes.
there are no questions.
Well, Cristiana, brilliant talk so far. I'm really enjoying it. We have one question before the break.
Okay.
Is from Jens, and Jens is saying that for Erebia ligea and euryale, it's true that the checker fringes, once the butterflies are not fresh, maybe those scales are lost very quick. And is asking, I can read directly the comment. The checker fringes are sometimes totally flown off in Ligea and Euryale. If I remember right, the hindwing underside of Aethiops has a second light band closer to the wing base. Is it a characteristic that works through the range? That's his question. I think maybe we could share again the presentation with the Erebia Aethiops.
Yes.
And then you can answer Jens.
Okay. Can you see the presentation? Okay, perfect. So that's right. Sometimes it happens that in one specimen the fringes cannot be seen, but if you look at them in transparency, you can almost not always, but very often just see something similar to a remain arrest of these fringes in a similar way of what happens to Lysander Corydon and Bellagus example, because for example usually the white part, because has less pigment, fades down faster than the dark one, but if you look at the fringes you can see that some scale are missing but some are present, so they can be seen really often. In any case, they can be separated from Erebia aethiops, also looking at this postdiscal paler band, quite regular inside the range of Erebia aethiops, that is also diagnostic, that has no white scale but small white dots. So in Erebia euryale and Erebia ligea in particular, you always see this triangle-shaped white near the costa that we never have in Erebia aethiops. In Erebia euryale, the white marking can be less marked, but you never see these clear, paler post-discal bands that we have in Erebia aethiops. And also in Erebia aethiops, you have also to look on four-wing upper set, where usually we have this eight-shaped red patch. There is also, sure, a slightly paler part near the base of the wing, but this is yes, this is a common feature. That's right, but this is not always so evident. But this can also help in the field. But I think that the fringes and also these minute white dots inside this paler band are more helpful. Also, we can see another characteristic in case of dubbed between Erebia aethiops and Erebia euryale. We can see in Erebia aethiops on forewing underside that the orange band is more sharply defined. So the same characteristic that we use between Erebia euryale and Erebia ligea. In Erebia euryale, we have the orange band fading toward the base of the wing, and this doesn't happen in Erebia aethiops. And this can be also useful. While Erebia aethiops and Erebia ligea cannot be confused, especially thanks to this white triangle-shaped patch near the costa on hindwing underside.
All right.
Right.
I think
Yeah, I think pretty well explained.
yeah, Cristiana has answers for everything. That's amazing. And I think it was very clear that you can separate those species based on different characteristics.